Okay, welcome everybody to another episode of O365Eh. Today's topic we're going to be covering is how to manage Microsoft Teams user membership. So we all know that as adoption grows within Microsoft Teams, one of the first challenges that you'll all have is the, membership management, adding users, removing users as they leave the organization or they leave within the group itself. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the ability that Microsoft has now provided us to create an organizational-wide team. So this is really geared towards a small, medium-sized organization for a single team collaboration. It's meant for 1,000 users max. So the ability to create an org-wide team is only available and visible to global administrators when the users in your tenant are 1,000 or less. So the interesting thing or the cool thing about this is that the membership of the org-wide team is synced with Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. So as users leave or join the organization, they're automatically assigned to this org-wide team. When the team is created, all global admins, the org-wide team is created, all global admins are part of the administrators of that team. And then, I guess as well as what I should say is that if you have users that are still in your tenant that you've disabled their licensing or their guest users or rooms, those users won't show up within the org-wide team itself. So users that are no longer with the company and won't be able to show up. So I thought that was a pretty neat way of managing the user groups or the user memberships from that. So I'll pass it on to Dino to give us maybe a little bit more on the best practice perspective to doing that.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Hab. From a best practice point of view, there's a kind of a couple things that you want to do to make the org-wide team a better experience for everyone, and namely, I'll just go through a couple points here. So obviously, you want to control the access to who's able to post. So you'll want to allow only the team owners to post to the general channel, for example, just so that it's not a big free-for-all in terms of everyone being able to post. As well, in terms of like notification overload, you'll want to turn off the @team and @team mentions that you can do today in Teams, just so that people aren't being bombarded with these notification messages in that particular org-wide team. And when you create the channels within the org-wide team, you'll want to automatically favorite important channels. So whether that's your general channel or there might be another channel that you create that you really want to be the centerpiece of this org-wide team, you'll want to favorite that so that people automatically, when they're joined to the team, will have that favorited for them and be able to see the communication that's going on there. So lastly, one thing you want to look out for, there's been reports of users not automatically being added to an org-wide team, which seems counterintuitive to what an org-wide team is. And the reason for that is the membership of org-wide teams is based on a user type attribute of the user. And if the value is set to null, it'll cause the user not to appear into the org-wide team. Fellow MVP Tony Redman was one of the first to identify this and blogged about it. If you want to learn more, you can look this up. But basically, you rectify the issue by running a set-Azure AD user with the object GUID of the user, and then you set the user type to member, and that will fix it for any impacted users. Again, you can look up his blog on Office 365 for IT pros, and if you encounter this. So Kurt, maybe take us through managing team memberships with dynamic groups.
Sure. Yeah. So groups have been a pillar of managing various IT applications for forever. And, given that Teams is used for collaboration and access to resources, it's no different that Teams are the centerpiece of administration. And the trouble with groups is if you have a static list of membership, of course, in a fluid organization, that becomes stale really quick. So if you have a group which is meant to all work on a project or have access to specific resources for that project, if members leave or new members are added, for Microsoft Teams, you would like that membership to be reflected in the team tied to the group. So at Microsoft Ignite, it was announced the ability to manage team membership with dynamic groups. And that wording is a little bit misleading. It's not managing team membership with dynamic groups as much as dynamic membership rules, which is an Azure AD feature. And it requires an Azure P1 license, but this allows you to manage an Office 365 group membership with dynamic rules based on Azure AD attributes. These attribute rules could be based on custom attributes, I believe, but would be typically be a criteria where you set, office equals this or department equals this, or any attribute equals a certain value. And the great thing is that membership is kept up to date based on those rules, and then the team membership will reflect that membership. So that gives you sort of a way to, out of the box, manage access to all the resources that team has access to. So that's a really great feature that'll help organizations manage the team's memberships that, of course, have access to organizational data and all of that. So it does require an Azure AD P1 license, and the exact wording of it is any member that's a unique group, or each member that is a unique member of the group requires a P1 license. So you need that for all members of the group. So keep that in mind. Other than that, that's a great feature. And I'll pass it over to Michael.
Yeah, so we talked about org-wide groups, and then we talked about, the dynamic membership rules for Office 365 groups. But those are, kind of two different use cases. But now what happens if you don't have a P1 license and you're not looking to enable all your users in your organization for a team? Dan Stevenson, actually, who's a senior director of Microsoft Teams customer engineering, he posted just before Ignite on Tech Community, he put a blog on a PowerShell script that actually synchronizes a security group to an Office 365 group. So basically what his script does is it, prompts that, his script prompts for the identity of the security group and the identity of the destination Office 365 group. And then it scans the membership of the security group and then looks at the Office 365 group and makes sure that any users listed in the security group are added to the Office 365 group. And then it'll go and say, hey, what additional users are in that Office 365 group, and removes those. So it keeps that in sync. And similar to the dynamic membership rules for Office 365 groups that Kurt was talking about, there isn't that 1,000 user limit. So you get to, leverage the limit of the team, so that 2,500 user limit. So that maybe is a little bit more flexible for different scenarios. Also, it doesn't have any P1 licensing ramifications.
Yeah, just to add, Michael, I think the great use case for that synchronizing security groups with Teams membership is a lot of companies or enterprises have good practices for managing access to resources on-prem with security groups, but they don't have those practices and procedures up in the cloud with Azure AD. So if you sync that a security group membership with your Teams membership, that allows you to control Teams membership with the same procedures you had on-prem and processes.
And I think there's one thing to note too is if you have some users that are in your Office 365 group that are not part of your Azure AD security group, those users will be removed from the Office 365 group after the fact, right? So just want to make sure that if you require the users that are in the Office 365 group to make sure you add them into the Azure Active Directory group beforehand, before doing the sync.
Yeah, we'll make sure to throw a link up to Dan's script on this blog or this episode as well.
So why, I guess maybe I'll throw it out as a question, why would we do a dynamic versus static group memberships.
I think it really goes back to the fluid nature of organizations, probably the primary use case. Even if you spin up a team for a small project, you think it's going to last for a month or two. Projects typically run longer than expected. And, when you look at a 6-month interval in your average enterprise, there could be a lot of turnover in terms of people leaving, coming to the project, or even employees leaving the company or new ones being added. So dynamic membership in general just allows you to account for all those changes in the organization.
Yeah, I mean, with the static list, you're really putting the onus on the team owners to make sure they add all the right people, right? So go through a little department, add it. If you have large departments, I mean, after 5 or 10 users, it gets a little tedious for an owner to manage that list.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's a huge problem right now for a lot of organizations, is just that the time spent managing these groups and orgs, and please add this user, please delete these users.
And there's some functionality that's dependent on membership, right? So you can't mention a person within a channel that's not a member of the team. So you go and I need to bring this resource from this other department in, and it's like, oh, I can't mention them because they're not a member. Then you go back and add them as a member so you can mention them. So there is these scenarios that from a user point of view, it's a lot of work to have to dynamically or statically manage the membership. Also, if you book a meeting and that meeting is within a channel, so you actually reference the channel, if the participants that you invite are not part of that channel, they don't get to see the conversation. So you have to think about membership in different areas and how your usage is of teams and channels. I guess the flip side is, why would you deploy an org-wide team?
Yeah, I think org-wide teams just in general go against the spirit of teams, where you have very focused group of people doing something specific. But as Habib mentioned in his introduction, if you have smaller organizations that maybe don't have the water cooler type collaboration app like Yammer or something that goes org-wide, you could use a team to do things like leadership engagement, announcement of town halls or enterprise-wide initiatives, and get feedback on them too. I think that would be one use case.
Yeah, definitely better than sending out emails for that kind of stuff. We were talking sort of offline, and Michael was mentioning, it's hard to recall, 1,000 messages as opposed to editing a post that you publish within the org-wide team as well. So I thought that was pretty interesting use case too.
Yeah, that central repository is a really good use case. So when we were pushing adoption and stuff, we kind of want to create an org-wide team for all adoption material for teams. So we have all the training materials and all the processes and the best practices for the governing of using teams in teams. So
yeah, if you're rolling out a new app or a functionality that you want to key in on, that'd be a great place to showcase that, so that users, you're not, it's not the water hose approach to training. It's just at the pace you'd like and when you'd like to, talk about these new features.
Yeah, and it was mentioned that org-wide teams right now is for 1,000 users or under, but the product group has mentioned that they are aggressively looking to increase that limit. So we should see something in the future around that.
All right, awesome. Anyways, thanks everybody for listening in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Thanks.